When you're doing an arrange override, you need to tell the Windows Presentation Foundation where you want each child to be. The .NET Framework has a structure called a rect, or rectangle, that you can use to specify the location for each child. So I'm going to create a rect here. So now my target rect needs to have all the information necessary to position where my child needs to be. In order to do that, I need to set 4 properties on my target rect: the X, the Y, the width, and the height. Let's start by setting the X. The X coordinate of my child, well, the first child needs to be at 0, the next child 20 pixels over, the next one 40 pixels over, and so on. So I need to multiply 20 by the number of children I've already placed. In order to do that, I need to keep track of how many children I've placed, so I'm going to go ahead and create another variable up here. Children resolved. And then my X is simply going to be 20 times children resolved. So now, the first time I go through this, children resolved will be equal to 0, and the X will be set to 20 times 0, or 0. The second time through the loop, children resolved will be 1, so my X will be at 20, then 40, and so on. The Y coordinate, I need to be at 0. Windows Presentation Foundation always puts the origin of any coordinate system at the top left. So an X value of 0 is against the left margin. A Y value of 0 would be against the top of my layout panel. So next I need to specify the width. So the target rectangle's width property, I want to actually ask the child how wide it wants to be. So I'm going to say child.desiredSize.width. So here, instead of specifying explicitly that my width is going to be 40 pixels or 80 pixels, I'm going to instead go to the child that I'm going to be laying out in the stack panel and requesting its width. I need to get the height the same way. Now that my rectangle has been created for me, I need to tell the child that it's time to arrange itself, and that I want to arrange it based on this rectangle. So I'm going to say child.arrange, and the rectangle I want you to use to specify your location is going to be my target rect. Now last but not least, if I were to end at this point, the children resolved variable would never be getting incremented, so every time children resolved would stay at 0, and I'd end up with all of my children pushed against the left margin. I just need to increment my children resolved each time through the loop. We saw that ++ earlier. In this case, this is simply saying every time this command is hit, increment the value of children resolved by 1. Now the last thing I need to do, the arrange override method returns a size. When the arrange override method is called, it receives a size. The reason for this is that my arrange override method for my stack panel could actually report that my size is different from how I thought it was going into it. This allows me to even override my parent when it tells me how large I want to be. In this case, though, I don't want to modify my size, and in most cases, I just want to return whatever I was passed in. So I'm just going to return the arrange size. I'm going to save, and since I'm working in Visual Studio, this time I'm going to hit the same Control-Shift-B that you can use in Blend to build, just to make sure that everything built correctly. Down here at the bottom, you'll see that my build was indeed successful. Let's switch back over to Blend, and you can see that my overlap stack panel has already switched over to the new layout method. So now my rectangles are positioned from left to right, overlapping each other by about 20 pixels. Now one thing that might make this look a little bit better is if those rectangles were rotated a little bit. With them sitting directly on top of each other, I don't really like how that looks. So let's go back to Visual Studio and let's add that. So now I've already established the rectangle. I'm going to add a render transform to it. If you remember in Blend, render transform is one of the properties that you can set. I'm going to set a render transform here. So right after I arrange the rectangles, I'm going to add child.renderTransform is a new rotate transform. Now, once again, it didn't know what this word was, so I'm going to right-click it and resolve that word as well. So now it knows what a rotate transform is again, and I can go ahead and supply the parameters. Now, I can specify a rotate transform with no parameters, but if I look through, one of the overloads, which is one of the other ways that I can call it, tells me that I can just specify the angle. I'm going to rotate all of my elements by -20 degrees. I'm going to save and switch back to blend. This time, the stack panel hasn't already taken the change because all I did was save it in Visual Studio. I didn't actually build. I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and B here. The application builds, and now the rotation has been applied. On both sides, I need to build the project either in Visual Studio or in Blend to be able to see the changes. Now I've got another problem. Now that my elements are rotated, they're extending beyond the top of my stack panel. So I need to move those downward so they're going to display better. Well, that's easy enough to do. If you remember over in Visual Studio, I explained that the target rectangle.y shows me what the top of my rectangle is going to be. Let me change that to 40, save it, switch back to Blend and build, and now my rectangles will move down by 40 pixels. You can see how I can just switch a couple values here or there in my arrange override to get everything to change exactly how I want it.